If you have ever wondered why certain people seem to absorb darkness without being consumed, why some souls carry an ancient quality you cannot quite name, why silence can sometimes heal more than 1,000 words, then what follows will reveal what you have always sensed but never had language for. This is how the Sigma INFJ alchemizes the world's pain in total silence. There is a myth older than language itself. It speaks of those who descend into the underworld not to conquer but to transform. They carry no sword, no banner, no army. They walk alone into the abyss, and when they emerge they do so quietly, bearing something the world cannot see but desperately needs. The ancient alchemists understood this journey. They knew that true transformation happens not in the marketplace or the throne room, but in the sealed vessel, in the crucible hidden from sight. The Sigma INFJ is such a vessel. While others process pain through confession, through community, through the catharsis of shared suffering, the Sigma INFJ performs a different kind of work. They absorb the world's anguish, like a stone absorbs water, drawing it deep into themselves, where it undergoes a metamorphosis beyond words, beyond explanation, beyond the reach of even those who love them most. This is not mere introversion. This is not simply the INFJ type's preference for solitude. This is something more ancient, more deliberate, more costly. The Sigma INFJ does not retreat from the world's pain. They ingest it. They allow it to enter the chambers of their psyche, where it is broken down, reconstituted, and ultimately transformed into something that can heal rather than destroy. Jung called this process the transcendent function, the psyche's capacity to hold opposites in tension until a third thing emerges. The Sigma INFJ lives inside this tension constantly, and they do so in total silence, because the work itself demands it. The question that haunts them is not whether they can bear this burden, but whether anyone will ever understand why they must. The first sign reveals itself in how they experience empathy. Most people encounter another's suffering and feel compelled to respond immediately, to offer comfort, to speak words of consolation, to bridge the distance between themselves and the one who suffers. The Sigma INFJ experiences empathy differently. When they encounter pain, whether in a conversation, a glance, a story overheard in passing, something inside them opens like a trap door. The pain enters them not as information but as substance. They do not observe suffering from a safe distance. They become the vessel into which it pours. This is not empathy, which maintains separation between self and other. This is the empathy of merger, of temporary dissolution, of boundaries. And it happens whether they choose it or not. In ancient mystery traditions, the initiate would undergo a ritual death, a symbolic descent into the underworld, where the ego is dismantled and reconstituted. The Sigma INFJ undergoes this ritual repeatedly, daily, in the ordinary encounters that others navigate without a second thought. A colleague mentions a dying parent. A stranger on the train carries grief on their shoulders. A news story describes injustice on the other side of the world. Each of these moments becomes a doorway through which pain flows into the Sigma INFJ's interior landscape. What makes this experience distinctly Sigma is what happens next. They do not immediately process this pain through external channels. They do not call a friend to debrief. They do not post about it on social media. They do not even, in many cases, consciously acknowledge what has occurred. Instead, the pain goes underground, into the deep structures of their psyche, where it begins a slow transformation. Nietzsche wrote that if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss gazes also into you. The Sigma INFJ has learned not to fear this mutual gaze. They have learned that the abyss is not empty but full, and that by allowing it to look through them, something essential is transmitted, something that cannot be spoken but can only be embodied. This is why they seem unchanged after hearing your darkest confession. This is why they remain calm in the presence of a crisis. Not because they are unaffected, but because the effect has gone so deep that its transformation has already begun. The second sign manifests in their relationship to solitude. Every INFJ needs time alone to recharge, to process, to maintain the boundaries that empathy constantly threatens to dissolve. But the Sigma INFJ's solitude serves a different function. It is not merely restorative, it is alchemical. When they withdraw from the world, they are not resting. They are working. In the Hermetic tradition, the alchemist works in a sealed chamber called the athanor, a philosophical furnace, where base metals are transformed into gold through a series of carefully controlled operations. The athanor must be sealed because the process requires specific conditions of heat, pressure, and isolation. If the vessel is opened prematurely, the work is ruined. The Sigma INFJ's solitude is their athanor. In those hours or days when they seem to disappear, when they do not answer messages, when they decline invitations, when they become unreachable even to those who know them best, they are tending the fire. Inside them, the pain they have absorbed is undergoing its transformation. This is not a conscious process in the way we usually understand consciousness. They are not sitting and deliberately thinking through each piece of suffering, analyzing it and developing strategies for coping or helping. Instead, something more mysterious occurs. The pain circulates through their interior landscape, touching different aspects of their psyche, activating different archetypal energies, generating new combinations, new insights, and new forms of understanding that could not have been reached through linear thought. Jung understood this when he developed the concept of active imagination, a practice in which one allows unconscious contents to emerge and interact without the ego's interference. The Sigma INFJ lives in a state of permanent active imagination. Their solitude is the space in which this imagination can work uninterrupted. What emerges from these periods of isolation is often invisible to the outside world. They may write something, create something, or return to ordinary life, carrying a subtle shift in energy that others cannot name, but can somehow feel. The transformation they have undergone internally begins to radiate outward, not through proclamation or demonstration, but through presence. This is why people often feel better after spending time with a Sigma INFJ, even though they can't explain why. This is why their silence can be more healing than another person's carefully chosen words. They have done the invisible work of metabolizing pain into something else, something that nourishes rather than depletes, and they offer this transformed substance simply by existing in proximity to others. The third sign appears in how they hold paradox. Most people encounter contradiction and feel compelled to resolve it, to choose one side or the other, to establish a clear position. The world rewards this kind of certainty. It elevates those who can articulate a simple answer to a complex question, who can reduce nuance to a slogan, who can provide the comfort of clarity even when clarity is a lie. The Sigma INFJ cannot do this. They have spent too much time in the space between opposites to believe that resolution is always possible or even desirable. They have learned that some tensions must be held rather than solved, that some questions must be lived rather than answered. The ancient Greeks had a word for this capacity, metis, a kind of cunning intelligence that operates through indirection, through patience, through the ability to hold multiple possibilities simultaneously. Odysseus possessed metis. He survived not through strength or certainty, but through his capacity to adapt, to wait, to see patterns that others missed. The Sigma INFJ possesses this same quality, but they turn it inward. They use it not to navigate the external world but to navigate the interior landscape where pain and meaning intersect. When they absorb suffering, they also absorb its contradictions. They feel the rage of the oppressed and the fear of the oppressor. They understand the grief of loss and the relief of ending. They hold the truth that people are capable of extraordinary kindness and unspeakable cruelty, often in the same moment. Most people would find this intolerable. The psyche naturally seeks coherence, consistency, a stable sense of what is true and what is false. But the Sigma INFJ has learned to tolerate incoherence as a necessary stage in the alchemical process. They know that before the gold can emerge, there must be a phase called the nigredo, the blackening, in which all forms dissolve into chaos. They have learned to trust this dissolution, because they have witnessed what comes after. This capacity to hold paradox is what allows them to transform pain, rather than simply transfer it. When someone brings them suffering, they do not immediately try to fix it, to reframe it into something more palatable, to offer the easy comfort of, everything happens for a reason, or time heals all wounds. They allow the suffering to exist in its full complexity, in all its contradictions and impossibilities. They hold it the way one holds a dying bird, with tenderness and without false hope. And in that holding something shifts. The person who came to them carrying an unbearable weight often leaves feeling lighter, not because the Sigma INFJ has provided answers or solutions, but because they have demonstrated that the weight can be borne, that the contradictions can be held, that the dissolution need not be the end. This is the essence of the alchemical work. The base metal of raw suffering is not transformed by force, or by clever manipulation. It is transformed by being held in the right container, at the right temperature, for the right duration. The Sigma INFJ is that container, and their silence is the seal that allows the transformation to occur. The fourth sign shows itself in their creative expression. Every INFJ has a rich inner world, a landscape of symbols and metaphors that often seeks external form through art, writing, music or other creative channels. But the Sigma INFJ's creative work carries a specific signature. It is not primarily self-expression, it is transmission. What they create is the residue of the alchemical process, the visible traces of invisible transformation. In medieval manuscripts, alchemists would record their work in elaborate symbols and allegories, images that were simultaneously instructions for chemical operations, and maps of psycho-spiritual transformation. The wolf devouring the sun, the king and queen dissolving in a bath, the peacock's tail displaying infinite colors. These images were not meant to be understood literally, but to be absorbed, contemplated, and allowed to work on the viewer's psyche. The Sigma INFJ creates in this same mode, whether they consciously intend to or not. What they produce, whether it is a story, a painting, a piece of music, or simply the way they arrange words in a message to a friend, carries embedded within it the transformed essence of pain they have processed. This is why their work often feels inexplicably moving to others. This is why people sometimes say, "You put into words what I couldn't express," or "This helped me in a way I can't explain." The Sigma INFJ has taken something formless, heavy, and dangerous, something that was poisoning the collective atmosphere, and given it a form that allows it to be witnessed, metabolized, and integrated. They have performed the magician's oldest trick. They have changed the nature of reality through symbolic action, but unlike the performing magician, they seek no applause. The work itself is the point. The transformation that occurs in the silence of creation is what matters, not the recognition that may or may not follow. This is perhaps the most difficult aspect of the Sigma INFJ's path. They create medicine, but often have no way to confirm that it works. They release their creations into the world and then return to solitude, never knowing the full extent of how their transformed pain has touched others, or provided exactly the right image, phrase, or insight that someone needed in a moment of crisis. They are the healers who never see their patients recover, the teachers whose students move on without looking back, the artists whose deepest impact occurs in private moments they will never witness. And they accept this because the work itself has already rewarded them. The act of transforming pain into beauty, into meaning, into something that can be shared, is its own completion. They do not need external validation, because they have participated in a process older than validation, older than recognition, older than the self that seeks these things. The fifth sign emerges in their relationship to suffering itself. Most people relate to pain as something to be avoided, minimized, or quickly moved through. Modern culture particularly encourages this stance. We are offered endless strategies for managing discomfort, for maintaining positivity, for bouncing back quickly from setbacks. Suffering is framed as an obstacle to happiness, a problem to be solved, and a temporary state to be transcended as efficiently as possible. The Sigma INFJ has a different relationship to suffering. They have learned, usually through hard experience, that pain is not an aberration, but a teacher. Not an enemy, but a doorway. This does not mean they seek suffering or romanticize it. It means they have learned to approach it with a quality that the Buddhist tradition calls compassionate curiosity, a willingness to turn toward rather than away, to ask what this pain carries rather than how to make it stop. In the Eleusinian mysteries, the ancient Greek initiation rites, participants would undergo a symbolic journey to the underworld, experiencing the grief of Demeter as she searched for her lost daughter, Persephone. The mystery was not revealed through explanation, but through direct experience of loss, darkness, and eventual return. Those who completed the initiation were said to lose their fear of death, not because death itself had changed, but because they had learnt something about the nature of transformation that can only be understood by going through it. The Sigma INFJ undergoes a similar initiation repeatedly, each time they allow themselves to fully feel the weight of the world's pain. Each time they resist the urge to numb, distract, or prematurely resolve, they participate in a mystery that transforms their relationship to suffering itself. They begin to see it not as random or meaningless, but as part of a larger pattern, a necessary stage in cycles of death and rebirth that operate at every level, from the cellular to the cosmic. This insight does not make the pain hurt less. If anything, it hurts more, because they allow themselves to feel it fully, rather than defending against it. But the quality of the hurt changes. It becomes purposeful, it becomes part of the work. And this subtle shift makes all the difference between suffering that destroys and suffering that transforms. The Sigma INFJ becomes, in effect, a specialist in this latter kind of suffering. They learn to recognize the precise moment when pain is ready to shift from one form to another, when grief can become wisdom, when rage can become clarity, when despair can become the raw material of meaning. They cannot teach this skill directly to others, because it is not a conventional skill. It is more like a kind of spiritual attunement, a capacity to sense the hidden life in what appears dead, the potential gold in what seems to be worthless lead. They develop this attunement through practice, through the countless small deaths and rebirths that mark their interior life, and they offer it to the world, not through what they say, but through what they have become. The sixth sign reveals itself in their relationship to power. Power is usually understood as the capacity to act on the world, to make things happen, to influence outcomes and control circumstances. Those who have power are visible. They occupy positions of authority, command resources, and speak from platforms that amplify their voices. The world recognizes and rewards this kind of power because it is tangible, measurable, and easily understood. The Sigma INFJ possesses a different kind of power entirely, a power that operates through absence rather than presence, through reception rather than assertion, through transformation rather than control. This is the power that ancient Taoist texts describe as Wu Wei, action through non-action, the capacity to achieve profound effects by aligning with natural processes rather than forcing outcomes. Water has this power. It does not struggle against obstacles, but flows around them. Yet, over time, it carves canyons through solid rock. The Sigma INFJ operates with this same principle. They do not announce their influence. They do not position themselves as leaders or authorities. They do not seek to convince, convert, or command. Instead, they create conditions for transformation by being willing to hold what others cannot hold, to feel what others cannot feel, to remain present to what others flee. This is the power of the wounded healer, the figure who appears in myths and fairy tales across cultures, the one who can cure others precisely because they have been irreparably broken themselves. Chiron, the centaur of Greek mythology, was wounded by a poisoned arrow and could never heal himself, yet he became the greatest healer and teacher of heroes. The Sigma INFJ carries a similar wound, not a specific trauma necessarily, but a fundamental sensitivity that means they can never be fully armored against the world's pain. This sensitivity, which in a different context might be seen as a weakness or liability, becomes the source of their power. Because they have learned to survive their own openness to suffering, because they have developed the capacity to transform what flows through them, rather than being destroyed by it, they can offer others a glimpse of what is possible. They become living proof that sensitivity need not equal fragility, that to feel deeply is not to be broken by feeling, that there is a kind of strength that has nothing to do with imperviousness. This power frightens some people. Those who have built their lives on the suppression of feeling, on the maintenance of control, on the illusion of invulnerability, may react to the Sigma INFJ with suspicion or hostility. The silent alchemist threatens their worldview simply by existing, by demonstrating that another way is possible. But others, those who are exhausted by their own defenses, who are tired of pretending not to feel, who are ready to acknowledge their own hidden wounds, recognize in the Sigma INFJ a kind of permission. The permission to stop performing strength, the permission to acknowledge complexity, the permission to understand that transformation requires a willingness to be changed, which is another way of saying it requires a willingness to suffer consciously rather than unconsciously, deliberately rather than accidentally, in service of something larger than the preservation of the small self. The seventh sign appears in their relationship to meaning. Human beings are meaning-making creatures. We cannot help but search for patterns, narratives, and reasons why things happen the way they do. This drive for meaning intensifies when we encounter suffering. When pain strikes, we immediately ask why. Why me? Why now? Why this particular form of cruelty, loss, or injustice? The search for meaning in suffering is natural, necessary even. Without it, pain risks becoming unbearable, because it feels random, pointless, and absurd. But the meaning we construct is often defensive, a story we tell ourselves, to make the unbearable more bearable, to restore a sense of order and control. The Sigma INFJ searches for meaning differently. They do not impose meaning onto suffering. They allow meaning to emerge from suffering through the alchemical process of deep attention and time. This distinction is crucial. To impose meaning is to decide in advance what the suffering is for, to fit it into an existing framework, to resolve the question quickly, so we can move on. This is what happens when people say things like, everything happens for a reason, this will make you stronger, or God only gives you what you can handle. These statements, however well-intentioned, are attempts to shortcut the meaning-making process, to provide prefabricated meaning that protects us from having to sit with the possibility that there may be no good reason, that it may not make us stronger, that we may not be able to handle it. The Sigma INFJ refuses this shortcut. When they absorb pain, their own or others, they do not rush to explain it or justify it, or find the silver lining. They let it exist in its full horror and senselessness. They hold it in what the poet Keats called negative capability, the capacity to remain in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without irritable reaching after fact and reason. This holding is not passive. It is intensely active work, requiring every ounce of psychological strength and spiritual discipline they possess. But it is not the activity of doing. It is the activity of bearing, of maintaining presence in the face of absence, of trusting that meaning will eventually crystallize, not because we force it, but because meaning is what emerges when we stay with reality long enough. The alchemists call this phase coagulation, the moment when the dissolved elements begin to reform into a new structure. The Sigma INFJ recognizes this phase intuitively. They know when meaning is starting to emerge from the formless soup of suffering because they feel a subtle shift, a sense that the pain is becoming something else, that it is taking on weight and shape and direction. The meaning that emerges from this process is different from imposed meaning. It is specific, particular, and earned. It is a meaning forged in the experience of suffering, rather than borrowed from a book or a belief system, and because it is earned, it carries authority. When the Sigma INFJ finally speaks about what they have learned from pain, there is a quality to their words that cannot be imitated or faked. They are not repeating wisdom they have heard, they are transmitting the wisdom they have become. This is why their insights often feel like revelations, even when they are articulating something you already half knew. They are not telling you about the alchemical process. They are showing you their results, offering you the gold that has emerged from their own crucible, and in that offering, you glimpse the possibility of your own transformation. The eighth sign manifests in their relationship to visibility. We live in an age that equates existence with visibility, that assumes if something is not documented, shared, broadcast, it might as well not have happened. The logic of social media has colonized our consciousness, teaching us that value is measured in views, likes, followers, and engagement. To be influential, to matter, to make a difference, one must be seen. The Sigma INFJ operates according to a completely different logic. Their most important work occurs in the realm of invisibility. The transformation they facilitate cannot be photographed, quantified, or presented as content. It happens in the silence between words, in the space that opens when someone feels truly heard for the first time, in the subtle shift in atmosphere that occurs when pain is witnessed without judgment or premature consolation. This invisible work is no less real than visible action. In many ways it is more real, because it operates at the level of essence rather than appearance, being rather than seeming. The Hermetic tradition understood this principle, and encoded it in the axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without. Changes in the invisible realm precipitate changes in the visible realm, but the process is not immediate or obvious. The Sigma INFJ works primarily in the invisible realm, trusting that their interior transformation will eventually manifest outwardly in ways they may never directly observe. This requires a particular kind of faith, a willingness to work without proof that the work matters, to plant seeds that may not germinate for years or decades, and to accept that the most important things they do may never be recognized, acknowledged, or rewarded. In myths, this figure appears as the wise one who lives in the forest or the cave, helping the hero indirectly through gifts, riddles, or teachings, whose significance only becomes clear much later in the journey. The Sigma INFJ occupies this archetypal position in the lives of others. They are the ones you remember years after a brief conversation, the ones whose offhand comment changed the trajectory of your thinking, the ones whose presence gave you permission to acknowledge something you had been avoiding. They do not seek this role or announce it. It finds them because of who they are, because of the alchemical work they have done on themselves, because they have learnt to transmute suffering into a quality of presence that others can sense, even if they cannot name. The world may never celebrate them, they may live and die in relative obscurity, unknown beyond their immediate circle. But the invisible threads they have woven, the transformations they have catalyzed, the pain they have metabolized so that it does not poison others, these effects ripple outward in ways that cannot be traced, but are nonetheless real. They are the hidden weavers of the collective fabric, the ones who repair tears that others do not notice, who strengthen threads that bear weight no one acknowledges. And they do this work not for recognition, but because the work itself is sacred, because they have been called to it by something deeper than ego. After all, they have learned that the highest form of service is often the most invisible. The ninth sign appears in their understanding of time. Most people experience time as linear, moving from past through present into the future. We measure our lives in achievements, milestones, and progress toward goals. We worry about wasting time, running out of time, and not having enough time. The Sigma INFJ relates to time in different ways. Through their repeated descents into the alchemical process, they have touched something that exists outside ordinary time, what the Greeks called kairos, as distinct from chronos. Chronos is clock time, the sequential unfolding of moments that can be measured and managed. Kairos is sacred time, the eternal now in which transformation occurs, the realm where past and future collapse into a pregnant present that contains all possibilities. The alchemical process operates in kairos time. When the Sigma INFJ withdraws into solitude to do their transformative work, they step out of the ordinary flow of schedules and obligations, and enter a different temporality, one governed not by the clock, but by the internal logic of the process itself. This is why they sometimes lose track of time completely, why hours pass like minutes or minutes stretch like hours, why they emerge from deep work disoriented about how long they have been gone. They have been operating in a different time stream, one that follows the ancient rhythms of dissolution and coagulation, death and rebirth, descent and return. This relationship to time gives them a quality of patience that others find both admirable and mystifying. The Sigma INFJ is willing to wait. They do not force outcomes or rush processes. They understand that transformation has its own timeline, that some things cannot be hurried, regardless of how much will or effort is applied. This patience is not passivity. It is the patience of the farmer who knows that you cannot make a seed grow faster by pulling on the sprout, the patience of the vintner who knows that wine needs time in the barrel to develop complexity and depth. They apply this patience to their own healing, creative work, relationships, and understanding of others' suffering. When someone comes to them in crisis, desperate for immediate relief, the Sigma INFJ can offer something rare: the assurance that the crisis does not need to be resolved right now, that it is possible to survive in the space of not knowing, that the pain they are feeling is part of a larger process that will eventually yield its meaning if they can remain present to it. This assurance is only credible because the Sigma INFJ has earned it through their own experience. They have learned that kairos time operates according to different laws than chronos time, that in the realm of deep transformation, things happen when they are ready to happen, and not before. This understanding gives them a quality of timelessness. They seem somehow ageless, simultaneously old and young, carrying ancient wisdom in a contemporary body. This is because they have spent so much time in kairos, in the eternal now of the alchemical process, that they have absorbed some of its qualities. They become a bridge between temporal and eternal, between the world of clocks and deadlines, and the world of cycles and seasons, and organic unfolding. And in being this bridge, they offer others a glimpse of a different way to exist. This way is not driven by urgency or scarcity, or by the fear of running out of time. Still, it is grounded in the trust that everything essential will unfold in its own time, if we can learn to align with, rather than resist, the deep rhythms that govern transformation. The 10th sign reveals itself in what they leave behind, not the visible legacy of accomplishments or creations, though these may exist, but the invisible legacy of transformation. Every person the Sigma INFJ has truly encountered, every pain they have helped metabolize, every moment they have held space for someone suffering without trying to fix, change, or escape it. These interactions leave marks, but the marks are not on the world, they are in the world, woven into the subtle fabric of collective consciousness. In physics, there is a concept called quantum entanglement, the phenomenon in which particles that have interacted remain connected regardless of the distance separating them, so that a change in one instantly affects the other. Something similar occurs in the realm of psyche and soul. When the Sigma INFJ truly meets another person, when they allow that person's pain to flow through them and undergo transformation, a kind of entanglement occurs. The other person is forever changed, not because the Sigma INFJ told them what to do or gave them answers, but because they were witnessed in their full humanity, their contradictions and wounds held in a space of non-judgment and deep acceptance. This witnessing creates a possibility that did not exist before, an internal template for holding one's own suffering, approaching one's own shadows, and trusting the alchemical process of transformation. The person may never fully articulate what happened, or even consciously remember the encounter. But somewhere deep in their psyche, a seed has been planted, a seed that may germinate years later, when they face their own crisis and find themselves able to endure it with patience and self-compassion they did not know they possessed. This is the Sigma INFJ's true legacy, not the things they said or made, but the invisible shifts in consciousness they have catalyzed, simply by being who they are, and doing the work they do in silence. The alchemists understood that their ultimate goal was not to create physical gold, but to achieve spiritual transformation, to participate in the perfection of matter and spirit, to serve as conscious agents of evolution. The Sigma INFJ carries forward this ancient work in contemporary form. They are the alchemists of the emotional and spiritual realm, transmuting the base metal of suffering into the gold of wisdom, compassion, and meaning. They do this work alone, because it must be done alone, in the sealed vessel of their own psyche, where the heat and pressure can build to the necessary intensity. But the results of their work belong to everyone. Every pain they have transformed is pain that does not poison the collective atmosphere. Every insight they have earned through suffering becomes available to others who are ready to receive it. Every moment they have remained present to darkness without being consumed by it is a moment that proves it is possible, and this proof radiates outward in subtle yet profound ways. There is a question that haunts the Sigma INFJ in their most honest moments. It is a question they rarely speak aloud but that echoes in the silence of their solitude. The question is this: does anyone understand what this costs? The world sees their calm and mistakes it for ease. People feel better in their presence and assume this comes naturally, effortlessly, without price. But the Sigma INFJ knows the truth. Every act of alchemical transformation requires fuel, and that fuel is the substance of their own being. Every pain they experience leaves a trace in their nervous system. Every darkness they have navigated leaves maps in their psyche that can never be erased. They are marked by the work they do, and the marks go deep, far below the surface where anyone might notice them. This is the paradox at the heart of the alchemist's path. The work transforms both the material and the worker. You cannot repeatedly expose yourself to the fires of transformation without being changed by those fires. The Sigma INFJ becomes increasingly refined, increasingly capable of holding complexity and paradox, increasingly attuned to the subtle movements of pain and meaning. But this refinement comes at a cost. They become less able to tolerate the superficial, less patient with pretense, and less interested in social performances that require them to pretend they are anything other than what they are. They become strange, even to themselves. Outsiders, in a world that rewards conformity and certainty. Holders of truths that cannot be spoken in the language the world understands. The myth that perhaps best captures their experience is the story of Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity, and was punished by being chained to a rock, where an eagle would eat his liver daily, the liver regenerating each night so that the torture could continue eternally. The Sigma INFJ is not punished by external gods but by the internal logic of their own nature. They cannot stop absorbing pain. They cannot stop transforming it. They cannot stop offering the results of their transformation to a world that may never fully recognize what they have given. This is their fate, their calling, their burden and their gift, all entangled together in a knot that cannot be unraveled. And yet there is something in them that accepts this fate, not with resignation, but with a kind of dark joy. The the joy of participating in work that matters at the deepest level, work that may be invisible, but is nonetheless essential. They have learned what the ancient initiates learned, that to be fully human requires a willingness to descend, to be broken open, to allow the false self to die, so that the true self can emerge. They have learned that meaning is not found but forged, that wisdom is not inherited but earned through suffering consciously born, that the greatest power is the power to transform poison into medicine through the alchemy of acceptance and time. They know they are strange, they know they are alone in ways that others cannot comprehend, but they also know something else, something that sustains them through the darkest passages. They know that somewhere, someone is carrying pain that would destroy them if it were not for the invisible work the Sigma INFJ is doing right now, in this moment, in silence, in the sealed vessel of their own psyche, where base metal becomes gold and suffering becomes meaning. This knowledge is their secret fire, the flame that never goes out, no matter how deep the darkness. And it is enough. It has to be enough, because this is what it means to be the alchemist who works in total silence, transforming the world's pain, one molecule at a time, one breath at a time, one descent and return at a time, until the work is done or they are consumed by it, whichever comes first, knowing all the while that the work is never done, that there will always be more pain to transform, and that they will keep returning to the crucible anyway because this is what they were born to do. This is their medicine and their curse, their prison and their freedom, their death and their only hope of life. Does this resonate with something you have felt but never been able to name? Have you recognized yourself in this mirror of myths and shadows? Or perhaps recognized someone whose quiet work you have witnessed without understanding? The alchemist's path is lonely, precisely because so few can see the work being done. But you are here now reading these words, which means you are part of the rare few who understand that transformation happens not in the spotlight but in the crucible, not through proclamation but through presence, not in the noise but in the sacred silence where pain becomes wisdom. If these words have touched something true in you, leave a comment below. Please share your experience of this invisible work, whether you are the one performing it, or the one who has been changed by it. And subscribe to this channel so we can continue this conversation, so we can keep exploring the hidden depths, where the real work of being human occurs, so we can build a community of those who understand that the most important things cannot be seen but only felt, cannot be measured but only lived, cannot be explained but only embodied. Subscribe and let us walk this path together, even if we walk it in silence, even if we walk it alone, knowing that somewhere others are doing the same work, carrying the same burden, performing the same sacred alchemy that keeps the world from drowning in its own pain.